As Kane descended the tavern stairs, Ghislaine demanded an explanation from Ricardo. Ricardo explained that he and Scoven had come to investigate rumors of a disturbance. There, they encountered Kane and his escort knight. Recognizing them, Kane wasted no time questioning the rumors he had heard about Ghislaine. Scoven had attempted to explain the situation, but Kane silenced him with a cruel grip on his jaw. With a sinister smile, Kane accused him of deceiving the heir of Lois County, then struck him repeatedly. Turning away, Kane ordered Ricardo to recount the story properly. Ricardo explained that rumors spread of Ghislaine, who, despite never training, had defeated an orc barehanded and even subdued traitorous knights alone. Kane scoffed at the tale, claiming he had only been trying to give their commander a much-needed reality check. Kane then shifted his focus to Ghislaine, sneering as he accused him of being the source of the problem. According to him, none of this chaos would have happened if Ghislaine hadn't lied. Ghislaine, however, remembered his cousin's arrogance vividly. Kane had always treated him like a servant, and whenever he visited Perdium, he caused trouble without consequence. No one dared challenge him, for his boldness and confidence were celebrated as the traits of a future heir. Meanwhile, Ghislaine's own insecurities and supposed weakness earned nothing but scorn. Yet, instead of anger, Ghislaine smiled at the memory. Kane faltered, surprised. He had expected Ghislaine to lash out at such provocation. Just hours earlier in Lois County, a spy had approached Kane with a proposal: kill Ghislaine. Initially shocked, Kane listened as the spy promised that the esteemed one would protect Kane's family if he succeeded. Kane admitted Ghislaine would be easy to handle, but murdering the heir of a county would be another matter entirely. He demanded to know how they could avoid scandal. The spy calmly explained that they could lure Ghislaine into a duel and stage his death as an unfortunate accident, disguised as an escort knight. The spy assured Kane the plan would unfold flawlessly. Smiling slyly, he reminded Kane that opportunities like this did not come often. Grinning with anticipation, Kane expressed disbelief that he now had the chance to kill his own cousin. Excited, he urged the spy to prepare at once. Even then, Kane wondered why such a powerful organization wanted Ghislaine gone. Something about his cousin had clearly changed. Smiling to himself, Kane turned to Ghislaine and demanded to know why he was simply standing there. Lounging on the stairs, he ordered his cousin to bring what he had prepared for him. Confused, Ghislaine asked what he meant. Kane explained he had heard about the festival's disruption and wanted to enjoy themselves regardless. With a menacing grin, he reminded Ghislaine that they had always worked well together in such matters. Slowly, Ghislaine realized what Kane was referring to: alcohol and women, the very things he had been forced to arrange for him in the past. Back then, Ghislaine had obeyed simply to avoid his larger cousin's beatings. Those indulgences had drained his funds, and only now did Belinda's warning about his reckless spending make sense. As the memories resurfaced, Ghislaine smiled again, realizing the solution to his financial troubles had been in front of him all along. Snapping out of his thoughts as Kane barked his name, he promised to bring what was needed. But with sharp eyes, he added that Kane first needed to settle a debt. The spy, watching nearby, stiffened at Ghislaine's sudden change in demeanor. Kane, caught off guard, asked what he meant. Ghislaine calmly explained that every extravagant arrangement Kane had enjoyed in Perdium had been paid for from his own purse. Now, he demanded repayment 1,000 gold. Kane scoffed in disbelief, insisting the expenses could not have exceeded 100. He brushed it off as nothing more than a friendship fee, a token of appreciation. Ghislaine laughed mockingly, calling him a fool. He had always been treated like a doormat, but those days were over. With a smirk, he warned Kane to pay up immediately or face a beating. The tavern grew silent as onlookers stared in shock at Ghislaine's boldness. Kane's expression darkened. Rising to his feet, he accused his cousin of acting out simply because he had been too lenient. He denied Ghislaine's strength, dismissing the rumors of him defeating knights, and called him a parasite who leached off the land, a disgrace despised by the North. With those words, Kane clenched his fist and demanded Ghislaine wake up from his delusions. Without warning, he lunged forward with a punch. But Ghislain moved effortlessly, sidestepping the blow. Gasps echoed through the tavern as Ricardo, the spy, and Kane himself stared in shock. Kane's fury deepened, and he swung again, this time aiming for Ghislain's head. Ghislain ducked low, shifted swiftly, and drove his fist into Kane's ribs with a sharp, decisive strike. Kane staggered back, his body racked with pain, shocked by the sheer force of the blow. Ghislain wasted no time, swinging a punch aimed straight at Kane's head. Kane managed to block it with his hand and allowed himself a fleeting smile at having stopped the strike, but the moment was short-lived. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony. The spy immediately rushed to his side, frantic, asking if Kane was all right. Ghislain, unimpressed by the display, scoffed and told Kane to stop whining, reminding him that he had blocked the attack. Angered, the spy snapped back at Ghislain, ordering him to stay away from Kane. The tavern fell into an uneasy silence, the crowd stunned at the sight of Kane, the one thought to be unbeatable brought so low by Ghislain. Surveying the room, Ghislain quickly understood Kane's intentions. Leaning close, Kane whispered to the spy, asking if his act had been convincing. With a sly grin, the spy assured him it was perfect, adding that the stage was now set to paint Ghislain as the aggressor. Determined to leave an impression, Kane drew a blue glove from his pocket, raised it high, and declared that Ghislain had dishonored the nobility with his lies, accusing him of an unprovoked attack. Before Kane could finish his speech, Ghislain hurled his own glove at him, silencing him instantly. The challenge was clear. Ghislain had called him to a duel. Kane froze for a heartbeat, caught off guard, but Ghislain pressed forward. He accused Kane of insulting him as an heir and striking his knight, claiming Kane had sullied the dignity of the nobility. With a calm, cutting smile, he asked if Kane truly intended to deny it. Regaining his composure, Kane smirked. He had always considered Ghislain a fool, but never expected him to dig his own grave so willingly. Unsheathing his sword, Kane accepted the challenge, vowing that Ghislain would regret this, even if it cost Kane his life. Ghislain then called out to Ricardo, who promptly stepped forward. He instructed Ricardo to gather the merchants protesting outside the castle. Ricardo hesitated, stunned by the request, but Ghislain, his eyes gleaming with a trace of madness, assured him that they would make a fortune from this. With the festival cancelled, both merchants and tourists had been restless and dissatisfied, but Ghislain believed that this spectacle would be enough to rekindle their excitement and calm their frustration. Soon, the stage was set. An eager crowd swarmed the area, buzzing with anticipation. Ghislain and Kane stood across from one another, ready to duel. The confrontation drew in throngs of spectators, many thrilled at the prospect of seeing Kane humiliated. The excitement breathed new life into the town, with merchants reopening their stalls and hawking their wares to tourists once again. Among the crowd, a chubby merchant shouted for bets, insisting that Kane's victory was guaranteed. Merchants, brimming with confidence, placed heavy wagers in Kane's favor. Resting his massive sword against the ground, Kane sneered, asking why Ghislain had turned a sacred duel into a marketplace spectacle. His voice darkened as he warned that even if Ghislain begged for mercy, his sword would not stop. Unfazed, Ghislain replied coolly that the crowd was large enough, and signaled the start of the duel. Just as the fight was about to begin, the spy interjected, noting that the betting was unfair. The chubby merchant explained to the crowd that no one had placed a wager on Ghislain, unsurprising, given how impossible his victory seemed. Kane laughed, mocking Ghislain, pointing out that even his own people did not believe in him. The merchant suggested altering the wagers, changing them to predict how long Ghislain could last against Kane. At that moment, Scoven, supported by Ricardo, stepped forward. He placed a bag of gold on the table, declaring his bet on Ghislain, shocking the onlookers. Moments later, Elena strode up and dropped an even larger bag of gold, announcing her wager on her brother. Even Ghislain was taken aback. When the merchant confirmed the sum was sufficient, Belinda, standing nearby, reminded Elena that she had warned against such a gamble. Irritated by the delay, Cain barked for the duel to begin. The referee raised his hand and signaled the start. Ghislain reminded Cain that as his elder cousin, it would appear improper for him to make the first move. The statement unsettled Cain for a moment before he sneered, saying it was far too late for Ghislain to pretend at brotherhood. At the referee's command, Cain lunged forward, his enormous sword swinging down with devastating force. Ghislain managed to block, though he was stunned by the sheer weight behind the blow. Cain grinned arrogantly, mocking him for stooping so low as to pretend authority as an older brother. Using the hilt of his sword, Cain shoved Ghislain back, then immediately swung it again, this time aiming for Ghislain's head. Ghislain ducked low, narrowly avoiding the strike, but Cain followed up with a brutal kick. Though Ghislain managed to evade, the ground beneath them cracked and shattered from the force of Cain's leg. The crowd gasped, stunned by Cain's overwhelming strength. Cain pressed forward relentlessly, refusing to give Ghislain even a breath to counterattack. With a smug grin, he basked in his own power. Though Ghislain noted the arrogance in his cousin's expression, he remained unfazed. Belinda, on the other hand, began to panic at the sight of Cain's display. Clutching Elena's arm tightly, she urged her to stop the duel. Not far away, the spies exchanged knowing smiles, already certain of the outcome. They understood Cain's strategy perfectly. His sheer force and unyielding assault left opponents with no choice but to focus on dodging. Eventually, fatigue would slow them down, and Cain would seize that opening to strike the decisive blow. It was a method Cain had mastered and one that had always carried him to victory. As Cain's strikes grew more vicious, Ghislain evaded them with surprising agility. Cain, noticing his cousin's nimbleness, remarked that Ghislain was as slippery as ever. He even admitted that Ghislain's skills had improved since their last clash. Changing tactics, Cain gripped his sword by the blade and swung the hilt toward his cousin, mocking him as he did. "You've always been good at running away, even as a child." Ghislain blocked the strike with his sword, but Cain seized the moment to hook him with the hilt and hurl him into the air. The crowd froze, certain this marked Ghislain's end. The spy smirked confidently, convinced that Cain's victory was already sealed. But as Ghislain descended, he muttered calmly that he had intended to go easy on his cousin until Cain crossed the line. Channeling mana into his legs, he steadied his landing and charged forward with explosive speed. Cain was caught off guard and gasped in pain as Ghislain's blade pierced his stomach. The spy's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized Ghislain had condensed mana into his legs to maintain balance and move with blinding quickness. Ghislain glared at his cousin, mocking his shallow swordsmanship. He accused Cain of mistaking fear for strength, of believing himself invincible simply because others cowered before his power. Taking a firm stance, Ghislain promised to open his cousin's eyes. Enraged, Cain lunged with his sword, but Ghislain countered with a swift kick, knocking the weapon back. Before Cain could recover, Ghislain sidestepped, avoiding the blade, and delivered a precise strike down Cain's shoulder, cutting toward his hand. Cain retaliated with a thrust, but Ghislain pinned the blade under his foot and followed with a near-fatal slash across his cousin's neck. The shallow cuts Ghislain inflicted dripped blood, shocking the silent audience before cheers erupted in disbelief. No one had expected Ghislain to display such mastery. Many in the crowd cursed their bets on Cain, while Elena gleefully pointed out the shift in momentum to Belinda. Scoven simply smiled as he observed. Cain inspected his wounds and realized they were deliberately shallow. Ghislain could have dealt far worse damage but chose restraint. Confusion clouded Cain's mind, unable to comprehend how his cousin's swordsmanship had surpassed his own. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Ghislain tossed his sword aside. His glare never wavered as he declared that their difference in skill was too vast to waste time entertaining the audience. Turning to Cain, he announced that from this point forward, he would fight barehanded. Cain's face twisted in irritation as he demanded an explanation. Ghislain, calm and composed, told him the duel would serve as a lesson. Rolling up his sleeves, he promised to deliver that lesson with his fists. Cain faltered for a moment, stunned by his cousin's audacity. Clarifying his intentions, Ghislain explained that his swordsmanship was superior and that offering a handicap would make the fight fairer. He proposed they settle things barehanded, a style Cain prided himself on. With a stern expression, Ghislain raised the stakes further. He doubled the original wager, adding an additional 1,000 gold, declaring with unwavering confidence that victory would still be his. The crowd erupted in shock at the unexpected escalation, unable to fathom Ghislain's boldness. Among the crowd, the spy was the most astonished of all. He could scarcely believe that Ghislain had the audacity to challenge Cain to a fight without weapons. Yet beneath his disbelief, he felt a surge of excitement, convinced that Ghislain's recklessness would ultimately work in his favor. As preparations for the duel began, the stout merchant urged the audience to place additional bets, loudly declaring the change to a bare-handed contest between Ghislain and Cain. The spectators were divided. Some mocked Ghislain for what they saw as a foolish challenge, while others suspected he had a hidden strategy and staked their money on him. Cain himself was bewildered by his cousin's decision. After a brief hesitation, he gave Ghislain leave to proceed as he wished. Casting aside his coat, Cain lifted his sword, making it clear that he would fight with his blade. Without further warning, he lunged forward. From the sidelines, Belinda scowled in frustration and urged her master to reclaim his weapon and finish Cain decisively. Even as her words rang out, Cain swung his sword at Ghislain with lethal intent. But Ghislain slipped out of reach with a calm smile, realizing that his cousin needed to be taught a lesson. He ducked beneath the sweeping strike, rolled to the ground, and avoided the blade entirely. Cain tried to redirect his attack, but Ghislain was already at his side. In one swift motion, he drove a fist into Cain's thigh. Before Cain could recover, a heavy blow smashed into his jaw, sending him staggering backward before collapsing to the dirt. Dazed and disoriented, Cain could not comprehend how the man he had always dismissed as weak and inferior had suddenly displayed such precision and skill. The crowd erupted in gasps of shock, their belief in Cain wavering as they began to consider the unthinkable Ghislain might actually win. Standing tall with a stern expression, Ghislain demanded that his cousin rise, declaring that the fight had only just begun. Enraged, Cain roared and charged once more, his sword flashing in wild, furious arcs. But Ghislain danced out of reach again and again, waiting for his chance. When the opening came, he seized Cain's arm, twisted it sharply, and forced him down. Before Cain could resist, Ghislain drove his knee into his cousin's ribs, forcing him to cough up blood. Staggering and gasping, Cain struggled to comprehend what was happening. The memories of Ghislain bowing in submission, of always yielding to him, flooded his mind. And yet, here and now, that same man was breaking him apart with merciless precision. Still, Cain clung to his pride, convinced that this fight should have been easy a victory that would secure his family's standing. But Ghislain showed no mercy. Blow after blow rained down, denying Cain any chance to recover. By the time Ghislain finally relented, Cain's face and body were battered and swollen, leaving him trembling in defeat. Seizing him by the hair, Ghislain looked down with a mixture of pity and contempt. He spoke of Count Lose, Cain's father, who had once supported Perdium selflessly even to the point of jeopardizing his own lands out of loyalty and friendship with Ghislain's father. Yet Cain, unlike his father, had chosen another path, one driven by pride and selfish ambition. The words stirred memories in Cain. He recalled bitter arguments from years before, when he had begged his father to stop pouring resources into Perdium while their own county suffered. He had compared it to filling a cracked bucket, pleading with his father to remain at home rather than leaving again to aid their struggling allies. But Count Lose had stood firm, insisting that his actions were bound by friendship and honor. The memory faded as Cain returned to the present just in time to see Ghislain's fist poised before his face. He braced for the impact, but the blow never landed. Instead, Ghislain pulled back and told his cousin that the fight was finished. Extending his hand, he invited Cain to rise. Shame and exhaustion broke through Kane's pride. Lowering his head, he admitted his defeat. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some wailed over their lost wagers, while others celebrated their winnings and chanted Gislin's name. Elena, standing among the spectators, beamed with pride at her brother's triumph. Belinda and the soldiers by her side, however, could only stare in stunned silence, unable to believe the outcome they had just witnessed. The spy stormed onto the stage, his face twisted with anger. Striding up to Kane, he demanded to know why Kane had surrendered so easily after suffering only the slightest disadvantage. He reminded Kane of the trust and responsibility placed upon him. Yet Kane simply replied that he was finished and insisted it was time to leave. The spy's rage only deepened. Consumed by frustration at Kane's weakness, he seethed in silence. At that moment, Gislin spoke up, a confident smile tugging at his lips. Turning to the crowd, he announced that the spy had generously volunteered to cover the cost of meat and drinks for everyone present. The hall erupted with cheers, the onlookers declaring their young master the best. The spy, however, stood frozen in shock. He quickly denied making any such promise. Gislin placed a firm hand on his shoulder, his tone calm but unyielding. He explained that this was the price of defeat. Reassuring the man that the expense would not be deducted from the betting pot, Gislin added that it was instead an additional contribution expected of him. As his grip on the spy's shoulder tightened, Gislin reminded him of the wager's terms, which now included another 1,000 gold atop the original 1,000. His cold gaze left no room for defiance, as he warned the spy of the consequences should he attempt to escape. Realizing the severity of his predicament, the spy dropped to his knees in surrender. He understood that refusing would mean certain death, and so he begrudgingly accepted Gislin's demands. The following day, the setting shifted to Gislin's chambers. He placed a large box upon the table and opened it, revealing a glittering pile of gold coins, the profits from his recent gamble. Even he was taken aback by the fortune, realizing it was enough to hire an entire mercenary corps. Closing the lid, he reflected on how difficult it would be to amass such wealth again, and how little time his enemies would grant him to prepare. He knew he needed to act swiftly if his plan was to succeed. As he contemplated, Gislin noticed Elena and Belinda standing nearby. With a nervous look, he asked if something was wrong. Elena smiled warmly and asked her brother how he intended to use his newfound fortune. Gislin laughed and teased, asking if she wanted a share. Elena shook her head, clarifying that she was only curious. Before he could say more, Belinda interjected confidently. She declared that she already knew what he planned to do. With a knowing smile, she reminded him that Lady Amelia's birthday was fast approaching, and teased that his entire display had been orchestrated just to secure a lavish gift for his fiancée. Amused, she remarked that his actions were far too easy to read. Elena gasped in surprise, asking if her brother was truly working so hard just to impress his betrothed. Gislin froze, startled, as though unaware he even had a fiancée. He asked for clarification, but Belinda only laughed, urging him to drop the act and insisting there was no need to feign ignorance. Elena then explained that they were speaking of Amelia from Rayfold County. At the mention of the county, Gislin's expression hardened. Memories of Amelia Rayfold resurfaced. He likened her to a spider. On the surface, she was a noble admired for her compassion and selflessness, a woman cherished by her people. But Gislin knew how history would unfold. In time, she would incite rebellion, earning the infamous title of the Witch of the North, and join forces with the Delphine Duchy to deliver a decisive blow that would hasten Perdium's fall. To him, she was nothing but a traitor. A faint smile crossed his lips as he asked Belinda when their father was expected to return. She informed him that the Lord would arrive within the week. Deciding that this would be enough time, Gislin rose from his chair and declared his intention to visit Rayfold County. Belinda, surprised, reminded him that Amelia's birthday had not yet arrived. She asked what business he had there so soon. Gislin revealed that his purpose was to secure funds from the county. The scene then shifted. A noblewoman placed her shoes upon the ground. She was striking, her crimson eyes gleamed, and the faint mark of a spider near her mouth lent her an unsettling aura. This was Amelia Rayfold. She handed her shoes to a ragged girl at her side. The child trembled, unable to believe such a gift could truly be hers. But Amelia, with a soft smile, insisted that only she should walk barefoot upon this land. Turning to her soldiers, she ordered them to distribute food and shelter to the surrounding villagers. Her men obeyed immediately, and the astonished people looked on in awe. As Amelia departed, the crowd raised their voices in gratitude, praising her kindness. The scene shifted once more, this time to Amelia's garden at Rayfold Manor. A man knelt at Amelia's feet, carefully cleaning them. This was Bernarf, her loyal escort knight. As she idly stroked a cat resting on the table, Amelia reflected on her father's teachings, his belief in absolute obedience from the people of their territory. She noted that the common folk would follow anyone who kept them warm and well fed. Bernarf praised her insight, assuring her that gaining the people's loyalty would strengthen her chances in the competition to become her father's successor. Amused, Amelia lightly struck his face with her foot before demanding news of the duel involving the finest northern swordsman. Bernarf apologized, explaining that he had deliberately avoided drawing attention to himself, as such exposure could endanger their plans. He reminded her that the time had not yet come for her to reveal her claws. With unwavering loyalty, he kissed her feet and pledged his blade to her service. Amelia, calm but commanding, reminded him that he was her blade by nature, as she had invested much in his growth. Leaning closer, her expression darkened as she warned him that weakness would never be tolerated. Then, shifting her focus, she asked about the status of the merchants. Bernarf reassured her there was no reason for concern regarding the Arctium merchants. He reported that their guild was purchasing every resource needed to rebuild the Forest of Beast outpost, recently destroyed in an orc raid on Perdium. He also revealed that they had intercepted the annual support funds Count Rayfold had sent to the region, and were actively recruiting soldiers and knights deserting Perdium. These men, hardened by years of battling barbarian tribes, would make formidable additions to their forces. Pleased with his efforts, Amelia warned him to ensure that the guild appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary merchant operation until their strength was fully secured. As they spoke, a steward entered the garden, prompting Bernarf to rise sharply and demand who had allowed the interruption. The steward, unfazed, delivered urgent news. Ghislain had arrived at the gates seeking an audience. Amelia, taken aback, questioned the reason for his visit. The steward explained that Ghislain claimed to have matters concerning the merchant guild. Both Amelia and Bernarf were startled by this unexpected turn. The scene shifted to the visitor's room, where Amelia entered and took her seat. Across from her sat Ghislain, clad in a rough coat and holding a small flower. He greeted her politely, but Amelia reprimanded him for arriving without notice, scolding him for his lack of manners. Unfazed, Ghislain smiled and offered her the flower as an early birthday gift. He described its fragrance and explained that he had purchased it from the nearby merchant guild, the Arctium Guild, where he intended to buy flowers from now on. Amelia listened but grew perplexed. Rising from her seat, she declared she had no interest in his ramblings and would leave now that she had received his gift. But as she turned, Ghislain's cold voice cut through the air, commanding her to sit. His gaze, sharp and unyielding, froze her in place. The timid boy she once knew who could barely speak in her presence was gone, replaced by a man radiating an intimidating presence. He calmly lifted his teacup and told her he had no intention of wasting her time. Then, with striking bluntness, he demanded 10,000 gold. Amelia, stunned, struggled to comprehend that Ghislain had come only to request such an enormous sum. She pressed him, asking whether this was at his father's command, but Ghislain firmly denied it, insisting the request was his alone. With deliberate calm, he poured the tea onto the floor. Smiling faintly, he remarked that Amelia had never once intended to marry him. The statement left her momentarily stunned. Ghislaine pressed on, warning that it would be catastrophic if word spread about her secret attempts to build power, especially during the ruthless succession struggle. As he spoke, Amelia's cat leapt onto the table, growling at him. Amelia brushed off his words as nothing more than a poor jest, but Ghislaine calmly assured her that her secret was safe at least for now. However, he hinted that his silence might not last if he left empty-handed. Amelia's expression hardened into a cold smile. She told Ghislaine that such a scenario would never come to pass. Without hesitation, she summoned Bernarf. The knight entered promptly, hand pressed to his chest as he greeted Ghislaine with formal courtesy. Recognizing him, Ghislaine recalled Bernarf as Amelia's loyal companion and a formidable swordsman, a man said to rival even the greatest blades of the north. Looking Amelia in the eye, Ghislaine cautioned her that his death would ignite a war. Could she truly handle such consequences? Unmoved, Amelia countered that if a ruffian barged into her chambers, stirred chaos, and was cut down by her escort knight, that was the version of events the world would hear. Smiling, she commanded Bernarf to kill him. The knight obeyed at once, drawing his sword. Realizing her intent was no bluff, Ghislaine placed a hand on his own weapon, preparing to defend himself. Before he could act, Bernarf smiled, momentarily catching him off guard. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the tension. From the suit of armor behind Ghislaine, an assassin sprang forth, aiming a deadly strike at his chair. Ghislaine reacted instantly, leaping aside to avoid the blow. As the attacker struggled to free his weapon, Ghislaine delivered a brutal kick to his chest, sending him crashing through the window. Both Amelia and Bernarf were left stunned by the display. Turning back to them, Ghislaine mocked Amelia's feigned politeness while orchestrating an ambush. With a sardonic remark about her lack of hospitality, he picked up his sword and charged Bernarf. The knight met him with a firm block. With a cold glare, Ghislaine demanded to know whether Raold County had abandoned all principles of chivalry. Bernarf, unfazed, offered a mocking apology, reminding Ghislaine that he was the one who had entered uninvited and disturbed his lady. Locking Ghislaine's sword in his arms, Bernarf declared that courtesy was wasted on someone like him. As Bernarf struck, Ghislaine evaded with ease, leaping into the air and landing a sharp kick that forced the knight back, creating distance. Rumors had painted Ghislaine as a man of empty words, but the fighter before Bernarf was no novice. Observing the clash, Amelia grew irritated. She demanded to know why her knight was holding back and angrily ordered him to bring her Ghislaine's head, reminding him that his duty as her sword was to carry out her will. At her command, Bernarf assumed his stance and released his mana, daring Ghislaine to step forward. Ghislaine smirked at the arrogance of a mere escort knight presuming to command him. Bernarf, calm and composed, remarked that he was doing Ghislaine a favor. In the blink of an eye, he closed the distance, swinging with blinding speed. Ghislaine barely dodged, but the blade still grazed his face, leaving a shallow cut. Stunned by the knight's speed and precision, Ghislaine braced himself as Bernarf unleashed a relentless series of fierce strikes. Forced onto the defensive, Ghislaine struggled to parry each blow. Amelia watched with a mixture of surprise and unease. She had never expected Ghislaine, dismissed as a weakling, to withstand her knight's ferocity. Still, she remained confident in Bernarf's superiority. Ghislaine managed to catch one of Bernarf's strikes, locking their blades together and pressing his sword dangerously close to the knight's neck. Before he could finish it, Bernarf twisted free, trapping Ghislaine's blade with his arm. Countering swiftly, he struck with the same maneuver as before. Ghislaine smirked, recognizing the move and attempting to repeat his earlier disarm. But this time, it failed. Bernarf's body was reinforced with mana, his strength unshakable. Calmly, he told Ghislaine that such tricks would not work twice. With a surge of force, he slammed Ghislaine to the ground and moved in for the kill. Recovering quickly, Ghislaine deflected the incoming strike and leapt back, creating space once more. He realized that Bernarf's mana reinforcement granted him overwhelming physical strength. Bernarf, in turn, acknowledged his opponent's resilience. Gislen, he noted, was nothing like the rumors suggested. True skill could only be understood through combat. Studying him carefully, Bernarf observed that Gislen's swordsmanship lacked the rigid structure of formal training. Instead, it bore the mark of experience sharpened not in classrooms, but in the crucible of real battle. With a confident expression, Bernarf asked Gislen if he had fought the barbarians so often that he had adopted their chaotic style. Tossing Gislen's sword aside, Bernarf declared that such wild methods might work on the battlefield, but here they would end. Breathing heavily, Gislen silently admitted how difficult the battle truly was. Bernarf's precise thrusts, aimed at vital points, disrupted his timing and sense of distance. At close range, Bernarf's larger frame and refined technique gave him an overwhelming advantage. Gislen realized he was facing an opponent far beyond his current level. Lifting his hand, Gislen revealed a thin mana thread attached to his wrist. He warned Bernarf that his own time was running out as well. With a sharp tug, he pulled the thread, catching the knight off guard. Bernarf, unfamiliar with the technique, hesitated for only a moment. Seizing the opening, Gislen struck him at the back of the head with his sword's hilt. As Bernarf staggered, his stance faltered, and Gislen pressed forward with a brutal knee strike to his face, leaving the knight reeling. Bernarf, dazed and confused, struggled to comprehend how Gislen had turned the situation around so suddenly. Amelia called out to him, but Gislen immediately raised his sword and attacked. To his surprise, Bernarf managed to block the strike and counter by shoving him back with his own blade. Gislen braced himself and held firm. Assessing the battle's intensity, Bernarf turned to Amelia and urged her to leave, warning that he could no longer ensure her safety. With resolve burning in his eyes, the knight declared that he would now fight with his full strength. Gislen, unfazed, smirked coldly, saying this was exactly what he wanted. It had been far too long since he had faced an opponent this entertaining. The focus shifted to Amelia, who fled the room with her cat in her arms. Anger simmered within her as she recalled the humiliation Gislen had caused. She wondered how he had discovered the merchant guild, convinced someone must have leaked the information. It was impossible for him to know without inside help. As she ran, Amelia grudgingly acknowledged that the rumors about Gislen slaying orcs and saving his younger sister from assassins were likely true. Still, she believed much of his reputation was nothing more than luck or exaggeration. Turning a corner, she expected to find the guard she had stationed there, but instead she froze in shock. Her guards lay unconscious on the ground, and a hooded woman stood among them. The stranger turned, smiling as she greeted Amelia, remarking on how long it had been. Pulling back the hood, the woman revealed herself Belinda. Startled, Amelia demanded to know why her maid was there. But before she could react, Belinda moved with frightening speed, appearing at her side with a blade pressed to her throat. She ordered Amelia to remain silent. Amelia froze, wide-eyed at the cold steel against her skin. Belinda's gaze shifted to the spider clinging to Amelia's lip switch. With practiced ease, she plucked it off. Smiling faintly, Belinda revealed she had overheard Count Perdium and Count Rayfold during the engagement ceremony. She recalled how Amelia's siblings mocked her for her fascination with spiders, and how Amelia raised them as tools of revenge. Belinda then questioned why Amelia still wore one. Was it a symbol of defiance or of overcoming trauma? Without waiting for an answer, she tossed the spider to the ground and crushed it beneath her foot, declaring that it did not suit her. With chilling composure, Belinda urged Amelia to cooperate. The scene shifted back to the room where Gislen and Bernarf's duel raged on. Gislen sensed the shift in the air as Bernarf released an overwhelming surge of mana. The knight sneered, recalling Gislen's earlier remark about being entertaining. With disdain, he spat that only a lowly mercenary would think in such terms, dismissing him as unworthy of calling himself a noble like his mistress. Taken aback, Gislen shot back with a sharp retort, reminding Bernarf that he was nothing more than an escort knight. He warned him never to question his nobility again. Bernarf lunged forward, unleashing a flurry of rapid strikes. Despite the knight's incredible speed, Ghislain managed to parry, though the pressure mounted with each blow. Bernarf's expression hardened as he demanded that Ghislain uphold the dignity of nobility. His attacks grew fiercer, far beyond anything from earlier in the fight, each strike forcing Ghislain further back. Frustrated, Ghislain snarled that enough was enough. With a powerful motion, he deflected Bernarf's blade and drove his sword forward, aiming for his opponent's head. Bernarf intercepted the attack with practiced precision, twisting Ghislain's sword aside and forcing him to retreat. With a swift counter, Bernarf lunged forward, driving his blade into Ghislain's shoulder. To the knight's surprise, Ghislain had deliberately taken the blow, using the momentum to push the weapon away and create an opening. Seizing the chance, Ghislain launched a counterstrike, but Bernarf blocked it in time. Realizing his opponent was far more dangerous than expected, Bernarf kept his guard high, locked down Ghislain's sword, and kicked him back. He coldly remarked that this was the difference between a true warrior and someone who treated the sword as mere sport. Ghislain, breathing hard, found himself exhilarated despite the pressure mounting against him. Bernarf's sheer speed, reach, and relentless assault dominated the battlefield. Every attempt Ghislain made to shift the fight into close-quarter grappling was immediately shut down. At one point, Bernarf cleverly locked their swords together, giving the impression of an even struggle, but in truth Ghislain's depleted mana made breaking free nearly impossible. The duel tilted further in Bernarf's favor, leaving Ghislain in a dire position. As the knight pressed forward again, Ghislain realized he could not afford to delay. The battle had to end. Bernarf had accounted for nearly every possibility, yet there was one element he had overlooked: Ghislain's unique mana cultivation technique. Drawing power from his third mana core, Ghislain unleashed a sudden explosion of energy and met Bernarf head-on. When their blades clashed, the surge of strength allowed Ghislain to force Bernarf's weapon down, tearing it from his grasp. The knight froze, stunned at the impossible sight before him, unable to understand how Ghislain had summoned such power in the midst of combat. Before Bernarf could recover, Ghislain raised his sword, ready to deliver the finishing blow. At that moment, a sharp voice rang out, commanding him to stop. Ghislain turned and saw Amelia standing nearby, her face twisted in fury. She ordered him to take the 10,000 gold and leave immediately. Irritated, Ghislain lowered his blade and stepped back, remarking that things would have been far simpler if she had handed over the payment when he had asked politely. Belinda, observing the scene, quipped that this was far beyond a lover's quarrel. Ghislain, unfazed, replied that it was merely a difference of opinion. He then approached Amelia, resting his sword casually on his shoulder, and informed her of unfortunate news. With a calm but firm tone, Ghislain declared that the price had now doubled to 20,000 gold. In the next moment, Amelia's rage boiled over. She smashed a vase to the floor, the sound echoing through the room. Bernarf bowed slightly beside her, apologizing for his failure. He admitted that Ghislain was far stronger than rumors had suggested, confessing that he had gravely underestimated him. Bernarf explained that Ghislain had unleashed mana surpassing even that of an advanced knight. Amelia's expression darkened. She muttered grimly that Ghislain had changed. When Bernarf cautiously suggested reporting the matter to the Delphine Duchy, her reaction was immediate and brutal. She struck him across the face, seized his shirt, and glared at him with venom. She demanded if he truly understood the terror Duke Deline inspired. Exposing the incident, she warned, would mean certain death. The alliance with the Duke was formed in secret, without her father's knowledge, and depended entirely on their covert agreement. The Duke had promised to back her rebellion in exchange for her help in overthrowing Perdium. If her siblings discovered the arrangement, they would kill her without hesitation. Her fury deepened further as she considered that Ghislain, with his knowledge of the Merchant Guild's secrets, might already be aware of the deal. Turning back to Bernarf, she declared coldly that Ghislain had to be eliminated, no matter the cost. Bernarf accepted the order without hesitation. Amelia then asked about the state of Ghislain's wounds. Bernarf explained that while he had managed to inflict several light injuries and a heavier strike on his shoulder, the explosive use of mana would likely leave Ghislain weakened for a time. However, he cautioned that they could not deploy knights from their own territory, as that would leave behind a clear trail. Amelia acknowledged the problem, reminding him that this was why she had trained a special group of operatives. Bernarf immediately understood her intent and asked if she meant to call upon the Wildcats. Amelia confirmed it. The Wildcats, she explained, were composed of war orphans, outcasts, and those with no place in society. Only the most gifted individuals with natural talent for mana had been chosen for this elite force. Amelia set a flag on the map before her, marking a location, and ordered Bernarf to send a dozen of the Wildcats there. She stressed that only those with refined skill in mana manipulation should be selected. Bernarf understood her reasoning. The ravine she had marked was the only narrow passage between Raffold territory and Perdium County. Its isolated location and difficult terrain made it an ideal spot for covert operations. He assured his mistress that he would ready the Wildcats as ordered. Amelia, her expression firm, swore to repay Ghislain for the humiliation he had caused her. The scene shifted to Ghislain, seated inside a carriage. He wrapped a cloth around his injured arm, lost in deep thought. His senses stirred uneasily. Was Amelia already plotting her next move? Fergus, sitting nearby, asked if he was all right. Ghislain answered that he was fine, noting that the cuts were not deep. Reflecting on the recent battle, he admitted he had pushed himself to the limit, yet was satisfied with the outcome. The 20,000 gold he had taken from Amelia was more than enough to serve as the foundation to rebuild Perdium. For his struggling territory, it was equivalent to years of careful savings. Though furious earlier, Ghislain had ultimately decided against killing Amelia. Her death would have sparked a war that Perdium could not afford. He knew he couldn't risk the safety of his county for personal satisfaction. With the constant threat of barbarian attacks, retreat was the wiser choice. Moreover, the knowledge he carried about the Artium Merchant Guild was already a heavy burden for Amelia to bear. Pulling on his jacket, Ghislain resolved to turn Amelia's misfortune to his advantage. Belinda, observing his composed demeanor, asked if things were unfolding as he had planned. She recalled his earlier orders to subdue the guards when the fighting began and to take Amelia hostage if she left the room. Ghislain explained that he had entrusted those tasks to Fergus. As he spoke, a sharp wave of pain shot through his body, and he coughed up blood. Alarmed, Belinda and Fergus rushed to his side. Ghislain realized it was the recoil from using and unlocking his third mana core. Though the pain was less severe than before, it remained a heavy burden. He knew he couldn't endure such strain every time he tapped into his power, and concluded that he needed to expand his mana capacity. While he wrestled with the thought, Belinda grasped his hand and pulled out a large needle coated with mana. She observed that his mana flow was chaotic and unstable. Without hesitation, she began applying the needle to pressure points along his hand. Ghislain was startled by the sensation, feeling something release inside him. As he exhaled sharply, his tangled mana pathways began to loosen. He quickly realized the technique required advanced mastery of mana manipulation. Ghislain reflected on Belinda's unusual abilities. He had long known she was not an ordinary maid after all. She had been brought into the household by his mother. Yet her true identity remained uncertain. Why would someone so skilled choose to serve as head maid in a rural county? He dismissed the thought. Whatever her reasons, having such talent close by was an undeniable advantage, especially since the challenges before him were only beginning. Belinda, kneeling beside him, assured him of her absolute loyalty and promised to assist him in anything he required. She then asked why he had taken such a large sum of money from Amelia. Ghislain replied simply that he needed wealth, and Amelia happened to be the richest person he knew. Both Fergus and Belinda were taken aback. Belinda voiced her disbelief, warning that Count Raffold would retaliate once he learned the truth. Ghislain, unbothered, assured her that Amelia would never reveal it to her father. With a faint smile, he reminded Belinda of her earlier words of trust. Irritated, Belinda pressed him further, demanding to know his true intentions for the money, insisting that she had risked much by standing at his side. At last, Ghislain revealed his plan to use the funds to conquer the forest of beasts. Belinda was shocked, while Fergus expressed doubt, reminding him that every attempt to claim the forest had failed since the time of his great-grandfather. Ghislain then reminded Fergus of the request he had made before entering the castle. Reluctantly, Fergus revealed that the individual Ghislain had asked him to locate was already at the designated place. Nervously, he warned that the man was unstable and not in his right mind. Ghislain dismissed the concern, stating that as long as the man was alive, he was useful, and insisted they leave immediately. Belinda objected, urging her master to return home because of his weakened condition. She reminded him that in his current state, he could not afford to wander aimlessly. Gel countered, explaining that Amelia was unlikely to let them leave without attempting to silence them. Belinda acknowledged this, tapping her muscle with confidence as she reminded him that she was skilled in combat. She also noted that Fergus, as a knight, would be a valuable asset against any threats. Ghislain reassured her of her reliability, but clarified that the role he required went beyond her expertise. With a smile, he revealed that they were on their way to meet the vanguard he had in mind. The group arrived at a wooden house hidden deep within the forest. Belinda remarked that it looked abandoned, but Fergus confirmed this was indeed the correct address. When Ricardo knocked on the door, it opened to reveal a massive, disheveled man with long, unkempt hair. He glared at them suspiciously and demanded to know who they were. Everyone except Ghislain was taken aback by his appearance. Belinda leaned toward her master, whispering doubts about the man's suitability. She pointed out that he looked frail, unlikely to survive another day, let alone fight. Ghislain, unfazed, assured her that they were in the right place. The man, noticing Ghislain's noble bearing, dismissed him as a bored aristocrat and turned to leave, telling them to go away. But Ghislain called out, addressing him as the former captain of the Regressed Mercenaries Jillian. The name froze the man in his tracks. He turned sharply, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. Ghislain smiled calmly, telling him he had long wished to meet him.